You ever come across anything like time travel?
Easy. I've already looked into it for myself.
Right on.
Oh boy, it's a time travel podcast. My name is Nate, and no stranger to rebranding himself, it's Brian Martin.
Hello, everyone.
Is this like a issue 1, like when they rebrand a comic book? No longer a Quantum Leap podcast.
What they would say on a comic book cover is it would have the number 51 up in the corner, small, but in big font on the cover it would say, first issue of a bold new era.
It's a bold new era. I like that.
Yeah, that's his first episode of a bold new era for Oh Boy.
Yeah, see, I was thinking of it as akin to the creatives on an ongoing title switch to the spin-off. There's a spin-off book, and a new team comes in on the ongoing series.
They reboot things all the time now.
Yeah.
Comic books get rebooted left and right.
And so do podcasts, apparently.
Yeah, well, when your primary subject gets canceled, then you gotta think on your feet, you know?
Yeah. We'll still call this episode 51 then. This is not a new...
I don't want to restart.
Yeah.
We were in the double digits. 50 episodes. We're just marching on.
Yeah.
Ever onward.
In a good way, though. This was on the docket regardless,
Yeah,
right?
we were going to talk about this.
You thought that this would be a good topic based on a parallel to Quantum Leap on this.
Yes, the parallel that reminded me, and we're recording this on Wednesday, so the little prince over there can watch his NFL draft tomorrow.
We just had a whole conversation about that prior to turning on the mic, and now you got to call me out.
Prior to
somebody needs time off with his wife tomorrow night, so
yeah. We all got problems, is what we're saying. But no, the reason I thought of this was because the last couple episodes of Quantum Leap focused on the rise of Gideon.
Kind of a spoiled brat, right?
As a child who had some unfortunate circumstances lead him to a life of, I don't know, Lex Luthor-style villainy.
Yes.
And Looper, the movie that we're talking about tonight, paints the same sort of scenario.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't want to get too far into it just yet, but Looper, the Rian Johnson film from 2012, is about a young child who is destined to become a ruthless tyrant. But it's not really about that.
In the backdrop.
This is the thing. Okay, so before we get into it here, I want to know, when did you first see this movie?
Well, I was about to say, you just turned it off, didn't you?
I last saw it 10 minutes ago. When was the first time you saw it?
I didn't see this in the theater, but it has been a good long while. I probably saw it a couple of years after it had been out. People were talking about it. But it's really pretty fascinating because it's a very divisive movie, first of all. When I first saw it, I loved it. And there was one element of it that I was like, that's a little weird. But
all right. I can't wait to hear what that is, because
Yeah.
I wonder if it aligns with mine.
I'm sure it does. I watched it again this weekend in preparation for the podcast, and again, loved it. I love this movie, but somehow on second viewing, I could better see why people don't.
Okay.
What side of it do you come down on?
Okay, so I did see it opening night. I was living in Austria at the time. Several of my friends back here in the U.S. saw this movie at least 48 hours before I did. And the general consensus was, you're probably not going to like it, Brian. So temper your expectations.
Wow.
And I'd been really looking forward to it because the concept is something I love the idea behind it.
Right,
you know?
Time travel.
The general plot of Looper is the year is 2044.
Oh.
It follows a fella named Joe, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, although you wouldn't even know it. he's buried under a bunch of young Bruce Willis prosthetics,
right?
I guess. Joe works as a looper in service of a crime syndicate. As Joe puts it in voiceover early in the movie.
Time travel has not yet been invented, but 30 years from now, it will have been. It will be instantly outlawed, used only in secret by the largest criminal organizations.
These crime syndicates, when they need to make somebody disappear, just toss them into the time orb, send them back to a specific time of day in a specific place, and these loopers just blow them away with a, like, imagine a shotgun but less accurate. Called a blunderbuss, which is an old term for it, so it's kind of cool that we're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Just blow them to kingdom come. Now, these people show up with a bag over their head. I always loved the way that time travel looks in this, where it's just suddenly somebody's there.
Yeah.
It's just blink in. There's no leap effect. There's no vortex or anything. It's
just like turning the camera off and turning it back on again. You could do this shit with like a VHS recorder.
Hey, they made this movie on a $30 million budget, so that's probably exactly what they did.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the rub with being a looper is that eventually the syndicate is going to send your old self back for you to kill. When that happens, your work with the syndicate is done. And from that point on, you've got 30 years to enjoy the rest of your life.
With a boatload of cash.
With a boatload of cash that you've made as an assassin.
Right.
This does happen to Joe, but his future self appears to him unmasked, so he immediately knows who he is, and clocks him and runs off. And the bulk of the first 2/3 of this movie are about Joe versus old Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Joe is trying to survive. Joe is trying to make it through this. He's trying to kill his future self, presumably, even though he has several cordial conversations with him. Old Joe, meanwhile, who has all this knowledge of the future, has come back with one specific purpose. And that
kill
is to,
baby Hitler.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what this movie is about. So, let's rewind back to what you asked me.
Right.
About my impressions of this movie. So I see it opening night, I come out, and yes, I am disappointed.
Oh.
I am disappointed because a lot of the critics, a lot of the early buzz for this movie was about how original it was, what a fresh take on time travel it was, all of this stuff. And I go and watch it, and I had 3 big takeaways. All right?
All right.
Takeaway number 1. The movie not only refuses to address how time travel works in this world, but acts like I'm an idiot for wanting to know. There's a point at which Joe and old Joe are in a diner, and old Joe says something to the effect of, look, just don't think about it. The time travel stuff's just going to give you a headache.
Right.
That felt extremely meta to me. It was like Rian Johnson telling me, like, look, this one's for the lay person. And I'm like, look, I've seen Primer. You don't need to make a movie for the lay person. Like, just compel them to keep up.
That's definitely one of the things that makes it so divisive.
That's one thing. Number 2, this plot, which was lauded as being original and fresh, is the most contrived and rote time travel concept in fiction. What if we kill Hitler as a baby? And I'm like, that is really fucking tired. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I get it. Really, we all get it. And I don't think it's that original. 3, that Hitler thing brings me to the next point.
Okay.
This is the thing I believe you have a problem with. I have to believe it's the one thing you have a problem with. It's not, maybe I'll be surprised. There are mutants in this movie. Why are there mutants in this movie? One reason. Because it allows the filmmakers to make a 10-year-old threatening. That is the only purpose for mutants to exist in this world.
About 10% of the population has this TK mutation. When it first appeared, everyone thought we were going to get superheroes. But it turns out this was it. Now it's just a bunch of assholes think they're blowing your mind floating quarters.
They're all telekinetic. They can make things float. You see people make quarters float occasionally. Things float. Whoop-de-crap. The whole point is that this kid grows up to be a crime lord called the Rainmaker, after, I'm assuming, the John Grisham novel. And and Obviously, we as the audience need to see in this kid something that is threatening, to believe that there are stakes involved, that maybe we should kill this kid. And we see those moments 2 or 3 times in the movie where he is having a frenzied tantrum that involves misuse of his powers and at least once results in the death of somebody. Right? So we have to believe this kid's threatening. But that, to me, is the only reason for this entire mutant telekinetic subplot to even exist.
Okay.
Now, upon watching the movie again...
Yeah, I was going to say, now you're speaking pretty emphatically here, so am I to assume then that the feelings that you had all those years ago are still there?
No.
Oh, no.
No, I would say I enjoyed it a lot this time. And this is only the second time I've ever seen it. I first saw it 12 years ago. Let's bear that in mind.
Okay.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah.
But no, I actually enjoyed it a lot more this time. I do still take issue with the mutant subplot. I think it's extraneous. I think there's an easy way to fix this. And part of me has to wonder, did Rian Johnson just never meet a 10-year-old at that point when he made the movie? Because 10-year-olds are, by design, horrid creatures. And there are plenty, I mean fucking plenty of ways to convey murderous or evil tendencies in a child that don't involve superpowers.
Sure.
We know that this kid is feeling abandoned. We know that he has issues with his home life and his caregiver, played by Emily Blunt.
Yeah.
And she's great in this.
Yeah.
And honestly, the kid's great in this. Like, he's a weird freak show of a kid, because he's got that thing, you know, like Anya Taylor-Joy has that head where it's like it's 80% eyeball.
Yeah.
The kid also has a head that's 80%
Very
eyeball.
expressive child.
Extremely expressive. You couldn't have gotten a better kid actor for this role, honestly. Yeah. This kid does all the work with his eyes. You don't need the superpowers. The superpowers lead to a couple cool moments.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know.
I guess if that's where we're going to start, yeah, that was the one thing that really stood out to me 12 years ago. Like I said, I really, really liked it. But at the same time, I was like, do I really need both of these things? And there's kind of an unwritten rule to doing these types of stories. If you've already got time travel as your outlier to reality, focus on that. Because if the rest of it's just going to be grounded, then unless TK is somehow related to why time travel exists, there's no reason to have both of them.
Right, exactly. And the TK thing is just treated like well, it showed up. We don't know.
Yeah, it's just part of this world. And it didn't sit right with me 12 years ago, but not enough to make me not like it. I really did enjoy it.
If that had been the only thing 12 years ago that I had a problem with, then I probably would have been okay.
Yeah.
Because I am now, because I still have that problem now, but I genuinely liked a lot of the movie this time.
I have less of a problem with it now. Okay, so this is why it's a little confounding for me, honestly, because
we just watched Time Fugitives like a month ago, and we saw a mutant time travel story.
Sure. Actually, I think it's probably unrelated. But it is confounding to me, however, because I am more cognizant of why it's a problem, but it bothers me less. It's
okay.
Really bizarre. I'm very conflicted on it, but you don't need both of these things. If you're setting out to write a story, you've decided time travel is going to be your outlier. And this other thing feels like it's just there to solve a problem.
Yes,
that you have with your
there
script.
as just a plot contrivance.
Right.
And nothing more than that.
Yes, but also no for me. I feel like it's part of the world that's been built up. And while I see that side of it, and I see that, you're not necessarily wrong, it doesn't bother me at all, because as this whole thing comes together, and there are other issues with it that I also just kind of brush to the side, but as this whole thing comes together, I like the result. I just genuinely enjoy the result. I do think it's imaginative. I think that the originality, quote unquote, that maybe people are talking about are not necessarily about, okay, we're going back to kill baby Hitler, but this idea of the loop, how they're using it for what purpose. And they do, by the end of this story, end up in a paradox, and they admit to being trapped in it, sort of.
Yeah.
So I do feel like that's kind of inventive. And
then he decides to break the paradox.
But then does
the result of the movie.
Is also
does
the
he?
question.
I mean,
right.
That goes back to my first problem with it, which is the time travel simply is, and we're not meant to question how, and I don't think anybody took the time to figure out how.
See, I think that's what most people hate about this movie.
100%. First and foremost, that was my problem with the movie.
Yeah, the whole diner scene.
When the diner scene happened, I started to check out. I was like, oh, so you're telling me this isn't my thing, movie. You know, because I'm the one who wants the fucking chalkboard. I want the chalkboard, and I want Doc Brown splintering those lines off and explaining to me how this all works. But I didn't have as big a problem with that this time around. I guess the mutant thing, sci-fi movies built around high concepts like this. Can you imagine, like, Children of Men? We know the general conceit of Children of Men. Mm-hmm. All we need to know is there hasn't been a baby born in X number of years. Society is no longer procreating. That's it. That's all we need to understand about this world. Now, what if Clive Owen also shot optic blasts? You know? It's like, okay, well, that was a choice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I feel like we'd need to tackle one or the other. We'll get to them both, but as far as the TK thing, like I said before, I do see how it seems extraneous, but as threatening as a 10-year-old could be, you know, we were talking about his expressive eyes and the acting that he could do to imply the danger, I can see how that would be a future threat. But I think what they were trying to do is create like an immediate threat.
Sure.
At the climax of this movie, stuff got to be floating in the air.
Right. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It does lead to a great moment where old Joe is kind of floating in the air and Emily Blunt's floating in the air and she's just saying, it's okay, I love you, it's all okay. To me, the stuff that works best with the kid are the scenes when the kid meets Joe for the first time. The first thing he does is bring him some water to drink. You see this compassionate side of this kid. The scene where they're sneaking out of the house through the tunnels and they have that moment waiting for the Gat guy to leave. Joe is kind of talking about his own past and what his mother was to him. Right. And connecting with the boy in that way. Like, those are the best moments with this kid. I do agree. I think there needs to be some sort of visual existential threat. And I mean, maybe this is a different movie too, but you'd have him hacking a cat apart in the backyard with an axe. I mean, like, that's...
But even that
10-year-olds do that shit all the time, right?
But again, even that is, this kid's going to be creepy. That definitely bodes poorly for the future. But immediately right in front of us, who's pointing the gun at us? If we're just hunting a child.
Yeah, if that wasn't there, then young Joe would never have a reason to have doubt. There would never be a moment of doubt with it. But when he sees what the boy does, he is like, we've got to end this. This has to stop. This is a danger.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it does provide a vehicle for him to have that pronounced moment of doubt. And I think that's pretty necessary for the movie. I just wonder if there's not some way to do it without making all of society a fucking mutant.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, there's definitely a way to tell this story without this aspect of it.
Yeah.
But I, again, enjoy the final product enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's just before we get further into the, you know, the ins and outs of the story and the intricacies of it, just the broad strokes of this movie and the story world that's laid out is very fascinating to me because it's like this great mashup of noir story with a Western. You know?
It is, yeah.
It's like, and then also sci-fi, and it's all kind of smashed together in this like gray, black and white palette. It's
like all our favorite genres had a baby.
It is. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. The first third of the movie is heavy noir, right? But it's all heavy noir. It just stops looking like a traditional noir at some point. And it starts to look and play, like you say, a little bit like a Western.
Yeah, and they end up at a farmhouse for the middle part of the movie, and they're just kind of hanging out at a farmhouse for a while.
Having a standoff, right?
Yeah, waiting for the TK story to sort of evolve.
Yeah.
So, like, you spend the first third in this noir kind of crime syndicate world, letting everything fall to shit. And then in the middle, gotta let the TK story catch up.
Yeah.
So let's just put everything on pause, and he's just kind of hanging out of a farmhouse. But that kind of thing still entices me because it wasn't like he didn't have a reason to be there.
Yeah.
I took you in so you wouldn't die. Now you're not going to die, so just take the morning to rest. Then you need to get off my farm.
I can't do that.
I'm sorry?
I'm gonna stay here for a little while.
I'm not cool with that.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, too. You just lost your take the morning to rest privileges. Get off my farm.
Nope.
This is a Remington 870. One blast could cut you the
Fucking half. Yeah, that's telling. You're holding a gun. I say I'm not afraid, so you described the gun to me. You wouldn't let me die. You're not gonna kill me.
Oh, so now I saved your life? That makes me weak?
Look, I'm not a threat to you or your boy. I need to be on your property. Just verify for me this is your house on the map so I know I'm in the right place.
What's this?
Basically, at this point, we've got young Joe hanging around the farmhouse because he knows it's one of the places that old Joe is going to eventually show up. And I was watching some videos, and one of the more critical people that talked about this movie mentioned that young Joe becomes a passive protagonist here where he's not pushing the story forward. And while I see that, there's no point for him to go chasing if he knows the guy's going to come to him. And you see a lot of Westerns where they set up, they circle the wagons, they wait.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
And it's just like a lot of waiting.
Here he comes over the hill.
He's coming and I got to be ready.
But that's a common element of Westerns and noir, is this guy that's just marching ever onward for revenge.
Yeah.
Right? I guess that is kind of the neat twist that the sci-fi time travel element allows for this, is that he's out for revenge against the person who wronged him as a child. The Rainmaker he holds accountable for killing his wife, and that's really the instigating point. I mean, he understood what being a looper was.
So in the original timeline, if we're kind of laying it out for anybody that hasn't seen the movie in quite some time, I would encourage you to go ahead and watch it because we're going to spoil the shit out of this. But
really should, and there's a really great montage.
Mm-hmm.
I really love the way they did this, where it just shows what happened to Joe in the original timeline.
Right.
Skipping year to year to year to year and showing where he went and where his life took him and everything. That was really, really great.
And it serves as a good transition from Joseph Gordon-Levitt face to Bruce Willis face.
You want to see Bruce Willis with the worst hair plugs since The Sixth Sense. It looks like he went to the same barber as Gary Oldman in The Fifth Element.
It does, yeah, for a little while there, because it's still jet black.
Yeah.
But only for a little while. So the original timeline, he goes through the process of what a looper's supposed to do. He offs himself when he shows up, takes the gold. He's on his 30-year retirement plan and ends up cleaning up his act after meeting a woman.
Yeah, after meeting the woman. He enjoys himself for a while, but then falls into what seems to be even worse crime than he was doing previously.
Yeah, and worse in that it seems more dangerous for yourself.
Right.
This looper job is just kind of a job that you do. Nobody's supposed to know about it, ever.
Right. You're shooting people, but it's really a victimless crime. Because the whole reason the Syndicate is sending people from the future back is they're sending bodies back to the past that don't even exist yet, technically, right? Nobody's going to be looking for this person in 2044. They're going to be looking for this person in 2074, and they're going to come up short.
And there's something about bodies being tagged, right? So you can't get rid of a body. There's a lot of little pieces that you could have problems with, and if you allow yourself to get hung up on them, you know, it all kind of crumbles. The tapestry that he's weaved here, Rian Johnson, if you start pulling on threads, it's going to come to pieces. But at the same time, by the end of the movie, it's kind of inviting you to start pulling on those threads.
It's not demanding it.
Yeah. And I think he wants you to also. So after old Joe finally gets captured by the syndicate and they're going to send him back to be looped, like you said, his wife gets shot. And suddenly he has a reason for revenge. And that's why he goes on the run instead of allowing himself to end his career, close his loop, as they call it.
Well, he's also thinking, if I kill the Rainmaker as a child, he will not exist in the future to
And
murder
he
my
won't
wife.
send me back.
And
yeah.
something I think this movie does well is set up the concept of the Rainmaker early on, because one of the other loopers, played by, get this, guys, Paul Dano is in this movie.
Yeah.
And he's not in it nearly long enough. But Paul Dano has a similar crisis when his future self is sent back. And I think it's pretty clever because his future self clearly does not want to die.
Right.
And isn't trying to get revenge on anybody. He just doesn't want to die. So
Yeah.
the first thing he does is start singing a song that apparently Paul Dano's character's mother sang to him as a child. So it's immediately triggering for the younger Paul Dano.
Right. So that
Who-
he'd know that, yeah.
Who knows it's his future self. And then at that point, it's like, okay, he's too weak. He can't do this. I mean, I don't know that I could kill my future self. I could definitely kill my younger self. That guy was a dumbass. Older Paul Dano mentions the Rainmaker, was the point of all of that. So we kind of know the Rainmaker exists.
Right. And he's got a kind of his thumb on the scale because multiple loopers are closing their loops
Mm-hmm.
at this time because the Rainmaker is going through and I guess cleaning up shop, basically.
House. Yeah.
And I don't know what the Rainmaker's plans are for the future and why they think that the looper program is not a good system. I'm not sure what his motivations are, but I guess you don't have to know. And it's
Everybody who's coming back is telling us he's bad news. So that's all we have to go on is what future Paul Dano and future Joe have to say about it.
They also have to illustrate someone that can theoretically by themselves take over 5 crime families.
Legend is the Rainmaker came out of nowhere. In the span of 6 months, took total control of the 5 major syndicates.
I'll take an army.
But he didn't have an army. The story is that he did it alone. Alone.
This one guy, the Rainmaker, has come in and he's taking over all 5 crime syndicates all by himself. He doesn't have an army. How's he doing it? We don't know. The threat of the TK is that he has the ability to do that because of his mutant power. So it does serve a purpose. And like I said, I'm not as bothered by it because A, it does serve a purpose. B, it provides the threat that's needed at the end. And again, the picture as a whole is like this big painting that as it comes together looks great to me.
It's visually very interesting, the TK powers that the kid has. And I guess if we were dealing with something that was a little more pedestrian, like an actual physical blunt weapon, something that's a little more quantifiable in terms of our day-to-day existence, we might look at that kid and say, oh, that's bad news. But because it's this sort of supernatural power that he possesses, we can look at it and be awestruck and horrified simultaneously.
That's true.
So we're never taken completely away from the idea that this kid could be good and he's still just a kid.
Yeah, because if he's hacking up cats with an axe, like you said earlier, there's not a lot of sympathy there.
Throw him in the well.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're ready to let older Joe gun that kid down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right.
Hit him with
It
that
does need to
weird
be-
little electric milk wagon that old Joe's driving at the end of the movie.
I think you're right. It needs to be nebulous enough that you can kind of wave it away. It's like, I can see.
You can see it going both ways.
Yeah, I can see how that's dangerous, but he could probably learn to control it. If he had love in his life growing up, then maybe he won't become this Rainmaker fellow.
Yeah. All Hitler needed was more hugs.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I said when I came out of the movie originally.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't think I gave this movie a completely fair shake the first time I watched it.
I don't get hung up on the fact that it's Kill Baby Hitler. I know that's what's going on in there, but that's not what I would say it was about.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the diner scene then. So if TK is the one thing that stuck out to me originally, the thing that I feel like most people, when they're like, oh, Looper sucks, because there's a lot of people just hate this movie.
It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's nose that they're talking about.
Well, part of
You
it is
really
that.
notice it in the diner.
I feel like for those people out there that just really don't like this movie, this is the thing that they typically point to. I think the TK thing, I don't want to say it takes a little more analysis to realize why you don't like that. I think it does, though. This is one of these things that people will pick up on it, but not be able to verbalize that that was an issue for them.
Right. It just seems shoehorned in.
But you don't really notice it.
Yeah, you really kind of have to dig into the reason behind all the decisions. Like we've been talking about for like 20 minutes now.
Yeah.
Like, why was this decision made? And specifically, why this? You're going to have to be thinking about this movie for the next dozen years. Is like,
right, exactly. The general movie-going public will just either like it or not. You know, they're not going to sit here and analyze that that's why this is a problem. But for those people that have just decided this movie is terrible, I think most of them point to this diner scene and what you said early on, which is the director is just telling you, don't overthink this. Don't let time travel be the thing that you get tripped up on.
Yes, yeah.
So do you know what's gonna happen? You done all this already? As me?
I don't want to talk about time travel shit. Because if we start talking about it, then we're going to be here all day talking about it, making diagrams with straws. It doesn't matter.
When I hurt myself, it changes your body. So is what I do now change your memory?
It doesn't matter!
One half of the population thinks this is brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a big part of that same population that says, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
This is the reason I avoid time travel. Like, as hard as it is for maybe some of us to really wrap our heads around people not wanting to engage with time travel stories, a lot of people think this is too complicated.
Fair.
You know, like time travel is too complicated to people. There are people who would see this movie and see Bruce Willis sitting across from Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing the same character and be like, yeah, but how can he be in two places at once? And I'm not kidding. You know?
Yeah,
like,
I don't get it. I've never had that problem.
I'm like, huh? But there are people out there like that. So
yeah,
I understand that those people want to be told, don't worry about it. Just take it and run. It
doesn't matter.
But then the other half are the people that point to this and go like, well, this is just fucking lazy. This is just lazy writing because you don't want to make it work. You want to just be able to have your cake and eat it too and just say, well, it's time travel, but don't worry about it, when really you just don't want to set up the rules and make it work.
My feeling was like, oh, you're being a little condescending towards me, the viewer that can handle this and wants to learn more about conceptually how this whole thing works. But then, upon repeat viewing, oh, that's just simply not the story he's trying to tell.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
And the thing that makes it work for me is, when was the last time you saw Bruce Willis try?
Yeah, that's
you know what I mean.
My heart broke a little bit watching this, honestly,
because he was good.
He does such a great job. And you watch this movie and you're reminded, you know, Bruce Willis for the last decade has been like a direct-to-DVD kind of guy.
Yeah.
Just plopping him in front of the camera, and we know now that half the time he probably didn't even know what he was doing there.
Yeah.
But to see him in this movie, it's a real reminder that Bruce Willis was really good.
Yeah.
In a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we even get a moment where he just opens up and diehards the shit out of an entire legion of goons.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
That part is actually one of the parts that I don't like quite as much.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. It's, again, very convenient.
Yeah, exactly.
Because all the bad guys are like, we know where young Joe is. He's at this farm. We're all going to load in the van and go up there. Sounds great, says Jeff Daniels.
Yeah.
And then his dumbass, I don't know. I don't know if it's really his nephew or not. I just felt like this character is like this guy's nephew.
Right.
Like the dumbass that can never quite make it work.
Like Lex Luthor's nephew in
Superman 4. Or like Frank Sabatka's nephew in The Wire Season 2.
Oh,
who's
yeah,
like a complete piece of shit. You know, guys like that. Fiction is filled with inept nephews. It's always the nephew.
Yeah, but that scene, he kind of goes in and Rambos the shit out of the place. And I didn't like that.
The moment that kills me is when he shoots that one dude, and the dude hasn't fallen over yet, and Bruce Willis comes and just puts his arms under the guy's armpits and uses him as a human shield.
Yeah.
And suddenly then, like, bullets make contact with what would have been Bruce Willis's torso.
Yeah.
It defies belief.
Arnold uses a good body shield in Total Recall, too.
Yeah.
Any Paul Verhoeven movie. But that felt a little out of place. It's a little convenient. And if old Joe is that formidable, then it kind of changes the idea of, like, both of them are on the run from the crime syndicate that's run by Jeff Daniels, and they seem like a real threat because these are just average Joes. I wonder if that's on purpose. At any rate, for him to just go in with a couple of machine guns and just gun everybody down, it's like, why haven't we done that before if you're just capable of this?
I mean, speaking of being capable, this scene also comes after we've seen Bruce Willis murder a child in this movie.
True.
So, gratuitous gun violence that you're designed to cheer for a character who 30 minutes ago murdered a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know if that works.
Yeah. Maybe.
The only thing is that these guys are actually, like, bad.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Yeah, but they were all bad.
And we know that
And
Abe,
very good bad guys, too.
played by Jeff Daniels,
Man.
is a bad guy. He's
He
great
is
in this.
also fantastic in this movie.
Yeah. I had forgotten he was in it. I forgot Paul Dano was in it.
Yeah.
I forgot Piper Perabo was in it.
Yeah.
You almost never see her in anything legitimate anymore. She was like Rocky
great
and Bullwinkle and shit like she was doing.
Right.
Great cast.
It's a fantastic cast. Jeff Daniels is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I was just very engaged with the character that he played and the scenes that he was in.
You gonna kill him?
Not if we can help it. Be too cataclysmic a change for the future. Now, what we'll do is dangerous in that regard, so not as dangerous as killing him, on top of which a man from the future runs free long enough, you know, this time travel shit just fries your brain like an egg. Why the fuck French?
I'm going to France.
You should go to China.
I'm going to France.
I'm from the future. You should go to China.
I'm going to France.
You're going.
When an actor that you associate with, I don't know, more pleasant roles comes out and is just an absolute villain.
Yeah. But he does it so naturally. Like, he's not
Yeah, no, it's great. He is
And-
so good in this.
a very wide range. Pretty incredible. But when his whole crew gets gunned down, save for one Gat man.
Who manages to get
Yeah.
away. The inept nephew we were talking about.
Right, exactly.
Manages to get out after only suffering a flesh wound.
I feel like to stick with the feeling of like that Western or even the noir a little bit, it almost feels like he should have circled the place with explosives and just brought the building down or something.
Yeah.
With everybody inside.
Had enough explosives to do it.
Like blowing up the gas line or something that just took everybody all out at once. As opposed to, okay, now I'm Rambo and just mowing everybody down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to be fair about picking apart things that weren't working because, again, at the end of the day, I really like this movie.
So much about it does work. And I guess we're talking about world building and stuff. Like 2044 isn't that far away.
I didn't even know it was 2044. I didn't pay attention because I was like looking at the world that he's put on screen here. At the time I was thinking, it's really brilliant that he hasn't given us a date. Probably a movie that shouldn't have had a date.
Probably not, because within our lifetimes, God willing, this movie is going to reach its expiration date.
Yeah. I hate that. I prefer when it's just kind of a nebulous date and they don't ever say when it is.
It looks not too far removed from our own world.
And not,
right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Here, it's like if we get to 2044 and it doesn't look exactly like this, it'll still look pretty close to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Except for that floating motorcycle.
The floating motorcycle, we're not getting those. We're not getting floating motorcycles.
That part sticks out to me like
but
a
you know what I
like a
did
sore
love?
thumb.
Virtually all of the blue-collar people in this movie have today's cars, but
Yeah.
with solar panels bolted to the hood.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a touch I really, really love. The best sort of world building doesn't tell you these things exist. It just presents it in a visual way and has you connect the dots.
Exactly. The city where he's operating as a looper, just a shithole or whatever.
Right.
But when he goes to the future and he goes to Shanghai, it's cutting edge technology. It looks clean. It looks pretty. It looks futuristic.
Yeah.
It feels like a real place. That whole world.
The city where this takes place is Kansas City, correct?
Okay.
I believe this is Kansas City of the future. So that's another thing.
I wonder if the Chiefs are still winning. Is Patrick Mahomes still playing in 2044?
Maybe. No, I bet that where Joseph Gordon-Levitt got his eyes from. He's got real pretty eyes like Patrick Mahomes, like...
Okay.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt's whole appearance in this movie is...
Oh, he's so good, too.
He's great, but it's just so weird. Like, looking at him, I'm like, you look weird, Joe.
It didn't take me long to get past that, honestly.
I mean, you do. You do ultimately get past it.
You get used to it.
And he disappears into this role unlike any other role he's ever done.
I'll tell you what, when he sits down in this first scene and first interaction with a person, immediately he does the Bruce Willis half smile.
He does. Yes.
I was like, holy shit, that's Bruce Willis. He's captured it immediately. And like throughout the rest of the movie, I'm just in awe of his ability to mimic Bruce Willis. And it's not the nose.
It's not the nose, and it's not in a way that comes across as a caricature.
No.
It's just he nailed the mannerisms. You know what it kind of reminds me of? The Kelvin Timeline Star Trek cast.
Okay.
Specifically Bones.
I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. Damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a physicist.
Yeah, that's the best example, I think, of what you're driving
Where
at.
it's like, you nailed it, right? I can't explain what, but somehow you have managed to...
This is Dr. McCoy.
You did it. Yeah, this is Dr. McCoy. It's the same thing with him. It's like, you are a young Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is one of his best performances, honestly. Just because I know what he's trying to accomplish and how well he ended up doing it.
Yeah.
The rest may just be kind of characters that he's built up himself, but you know what he was aiming for, and he hits the target so well.
Yeah, really does.
It really is quite incredible. Like, if you just watch his face, like, the way he carries himself, he's just Bruce Willis. It's really, really impressive. We got off on a tangent for that, but definitely worth mentioning.
So here's a quote from Rian Johnson that kind of circles back to what we were talking about regarding time travel and its role in this movie.
Okay.
He said that even though it's a time travel movie, the pleasure of it doesn't come from the mass of time travel. It's not a film like Primer, for instance, which I just referred to like 10 minutes ago, right?
Right.
Where the big part of the enjoyment is kind of working out all the intricacies of it. For Looper, I very much wanted it to be a more character-based movie that is more about how these characters dealt with the situation that time travel has brought about. So the biggest challenge was figuring out how not to spend the whole movie explaining the rules and figure out how to put it out there in a way that made sense on some intuitive level for the audience, then get past it and deal with the real meat of the story. I would say mission accomplished.
Yeah, I think so too.
Watching it now and understanding that this movie is not going to be what I want it to be, it's going to be what it simply is, it turns out that it's more or less exactly what I'd like it to be.
And let me just say, Rian Johnson, I may have mentioned before in prior episodes on this podcast, but he has become one of probably two directors whose movie I will see because they directed it.
Yui Bowl being the other one.
That's right. Two?
You know, the guy who did all those Alone in the Dark. No, he might not have done that one. He did Postal. He did House of the Dead.
Oh.
You know, all those really shitty video game movies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that guy.
Not Yui Bowl.
No, Tarantino is the other one.
Sure.
I'll see a Tarantino movie because it's Tarantino's movie.
Yeah.
I'll see a Rian Johnson movie because Rian Johnson is putting this out.
I mean, he's earned goodwill. And even with me in the before times of like last week where I didn't really care for Looper very much, he was still up there for me too because of Poker Face, The Glass Onions, and what he did on Breaking Bad. So.
Right. Breaking Bad is where I first discovered him. He did Ozymandias, did he not?
He did.
I believe he did Ozymandias, and then the bottle episode, The Fly.
The Fly, yeah. Speaking of another divisive production from Rian Johnson.
Yeah, people didn't like that, did they?
No, there's a lot of people who don't like it. I was like, I love it, and I get it. The Fly is great.
Yeah.
That's my take on
and
The Fly.
Ozymandias also.
I mean, it's undeniably
amazing.
good. Like, I think that one everybody can get behind.
And I was listening to a behind the scenes podcast or whatever, the watch along podcast with Vince Gilligan, where he first mentioned Rian Johnson and Brick. And of course, I followed Rian Johnson from Breaking Bad to, well, let me check out this Brick movie, which I love Brick.
Very good.
I've shared it with a friend or two, and I don't have the same affinity for it that I do. And I think Rian Johnson has also admitted that that's going to be not for everybody.
You know, if I had seen Brick before I saw Looper, I might have gone into Looper expecting something a little different. I might not have expected it to be a time travel story. I might have expected it to be
a Rian Johnson
Rian Johnson story, right?
Yeah. Folks, if you haven't seen Brick, go watch Brick. Especially if you like detective stories, noir type things. Just a very inventive noir detective story.
Yes.
And of course he went on to do the whodunits and
the fun stuff.
I said it before, The Last Jedi.
I can't even
big proponent of The Last Jedi.
I can't believe we made it this far in and didn't mention The Last Jedi earlier.
Well, we just started talking about Rian Johnson now.
And time travel. This is a show about time travel. But yeah, the guy has not had a miss, I don't think.
Well, others would argue.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
people call this a miss. People hate The Last Jedi.
Yeah, well, yeah. People talk about his most divisive film. It's The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Like, hostility.
Yeah.
That is, like, I can't believe that all these years later, people are still as just fervently, passionately against that movie. And in favor of it. Because I won't even hesitate. I'm like, look, I love The Last Jedi, and here's all the reasons I love The Last Jedi. You know?
Yeah, I think it's pretty great, too. I can see the drawbacks of it, and I see when people complain legitimately about certain things. Legitimately.
But there are a lot of illegitimate complaints about The Last Jedi out there. Not to get into that, though.
Right, exactly. But when you decide to make failure your theme, you run the risk of creating an entire subplot that goes absolutely nowhere.
Yes.
You know?
Right. Because the whole point was that it didn't.
Yeah, a lot of people hate that part, that whole part on the casino island, and then they just hate what he did with Luke Skywalker. I look at that and don't see how you could hate what he did with Luke Skywalker.
I feel like people who hate what he did with Luke Skywalker haven't lived long enough yet. The hero's journey ends the way Luke Skywalker's journey ends.
Yeah.
Like it simply does.
I think you look at the 20 minutes of him standing in front of Kylo Ren, and that makes the whole freaking movie for me.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Staring down the Empire with a laser sword. He's just incredible in that. But anyway, this is a time travel podcast.
It's a Rian Johnson podcast now. Next week, we're going to start talking about every episode of Poker Face. No, we should.
We should. We could.
I would love to talk about Poker Face.
As soon as time travel comes in. So, very talented director, very talented writer-director, and just a big fan of Rian Johnson.
And landed such a great cast for this movie.
Incredible cast. I think kind of where we left off, we're talking about, does the time travel work? Well, you had read off that quote that, that wasn't the point, but I think by the end of the movie, you can't not discuss it. And
right.
I think that's the other thing that frustrates people is that you have this entire scene where you're telling us not to think about the time travel, and then the entire resolution of your movie depends on the idea that it's a time travel movie.
Right, that you can basically end your life now and just remove old Joe from the equation.
Right. And, it turns out that old Joe created the Rainmaker.
There's stories he has a synthetic jaw, saw his mom shot, shit like that. But word spread about him through the ex-looper grapevine, because the first thing he did was start closing loops.
Right, this whole sequence of events is what led to the creation of the Rainmaker, and young Joe is sitting there seeing it just game out over the years.
Right.
So there were two ways to read that scene, I think. The movie ends, old Joe has come to the farm to just obliterate this kid. Young Joe
has developed a relationship with the young kid.
And Emily Blunt.
To be blunt.
Yeah. Emily Blunt's trying to get the kid to go back into the corn.
Go back into the corn.
Yeah, because children of the corn, you know. He's definitely a child of the corn. And Bruce Willis is like, come on, lady, get out of the way. And young Joe sees this whole thing play out in his head. He sees old Joe shoot Emily Blunt. The kid sees Emily Blunt die. He runs off into the corn. Old Joe never gets him. And this kid runs away and hops a train somewhere and eventually just harbors all of this animosity at having seen this woman that we know to be his mother, his actual mother.
All these tragic events lead to evil Rainmaker, supposedly.
One of the ways to read that sequence and Joe's voiceover was that if it wasn't going to happen this way, it was going to happen another way. Right? The Rainmaker's rise was always inevitable because of something. Because we know, and this is again where the time travel gets a little wonky, that the original version of old Joe's future isn't the same thing we see play out throughout the course of Looper. Because, if for nothing else, there's an interesting, I will say, conceit that's developed where the young Looper can carve something, a message into their arm, that then old Looper looks at their arm and sees the scar appear in real time. And I'm like, okay, that was one of the things in the movie the first time. I was like, I don't know if I buy that this works like that. It leads to a really funny moment because what's the waitress's name is like Beatrice or something, or Beatrix or something. She's French, right? And Joe carves that into his arm, so old Joe knows to meet him at the diner. And old Joe comes in and is like, you know, there's a waitress with a much shorter name that works on the weekends, you know?
Yeah.
It was like, that's pretty funny.
It starts off really great, too, though, because of the prior setup with Paul Dano's future self.
We see that happen there. And it also, that immediate real-time response to something that happens in the moment with the younger character also sets up the finale of the movie. That's when Joe is visualizing all these future events play out. And that his actions are leading to the creation of the Rainmaker.
Which we've already seen the first aspect because the Rainmaker supposedly, by rumor, has an artificial jaw, okay?
Right.
And he's already been shot in the face by old Joe. At least got him in the jaw, and he's got a big bloody jaw or whatever.
Definitely nicked the kid.
You nicked the kid. So he's in the process of turning this young kid into the Rainmaker.
And young Joe turns the blunderbuss on himself and kills himself, and then old Joe just blinks out of existence because he doesn't exist anymore because the timeline has been altered.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it works.
I like it because of that great voiceover he has leading up to it about breaking the cycle.
Then I saw it. I saw a mom who would die for her son. A man who would kill for his wife. A boy, angry and alone, laid out in front of him the bad path. I saw it. And the path was a circle. Round and round.
Yeah. And I also really enjoy the lack of special effects. I really do.
Old Joe just poof.
Yeah.
He kind of winces for a second, like he realizes, ooh, that hurt, and then gone.
Right, because it catches up with him.
Yeah.
But then if old Joe disappears, that means old Joe never came back. And if he never came back, then how did they get out in that cornfield?
Right. It opens up a real can of worms.
Yeah.
You start thinking about it. That's the same problem with the carved message on the arm. Because if you're doing that now in real time, wouldn't it mean that that carved message has been on your arm for your whole life? It's one thing when the character is just noticing it for the first time. I'm going to level with you about dying. It's not something you just suddenly notice happened to you 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The Paul Dano character is to like the nth degree. Young Paul Dano
God, yeah, the stuff
gets
they do
captured and they start torturing him. And this is where it's actually kind of a double joke with the carved arm, because we learn that that's how they get in touch with these people. So they've got Paul Dano and they carve into his arm, be at this place in 15 minutes. And of course, the scar starts to appear in old Paul Dano's arm, and then they start cutting off fingers.
Yep.
Right? And
you
the
fingers
start
disappearing.
they just start disappearing off his hand, and then his nose has been carved off, and that starts to disappear. And he basically becomes dismembered slowly.
Missing a nose eventually starts to... His foot disappears.
And suddenly he's on some nubs crawling up to the door of the place where he's supposed to be when they open the door and shoot him.
Yeah, and it's like, so are you telling me that Paul Dano's character now exists for another 30 years and is sent back in time? Is that what you're telling me?
Right,
Gimpy
exactly.
Paul Dano with no nose, no feet, no fingers.
Right. So
the links will go to protect the sacred timeline, folks.
If you're going to believe that Joe will just blink out of existence and then try to square that with this other event with Paul Dano's character, the butterfly effect would seem to suggest that as soon as he gets captured and something carved into his arm or a foot cut off or something, his life has changed enough that it surely didn't go the same way to where he gets captured and sent back 30 years from now.
Right.
It doesn't take much for that kind of thing to change the future so much.
So the question becomes, is there one timeline or are there multiple timelines? How does the timeline work, right? The fact is it doesn't really work.
Right.
Everything we're experiencing is simply happening in the present, right?
Right.
With no visible impact on the future that we're allowed to see.
That we're ever allowed to
right?
see. Yeah. Except we do see the old future.
The original version of it.
That has clearly been erased. And there's a part in that same diner scene that people are upset about that could also deal with this because, old Joe is trying to explain to young Joe, look, I can tell you're still going to meet this woman. She's going to change your life. And it's his wife, of course, and he's got a picture of her in the shared pocket watch that they both own. And old Joe is trying to convince him that, look, we've got to save this woman because she gets killed.
And I'm going to stop him from killing my wife.
Fuck you. And your wife. None of this concerns me.
This is gonna happen to you,
It happened to you. It doesn't have to happen to me. You got a picture right there on my watch? Let me see it. Show me the picture, and as soon as I see her, I'll walk away. I'll fucking marry someone else. I promise. So when I see that picture, that fog inside your brain should just swallow up all her memories, right? She'll be gone. If you give her up, she'll be safe.
Give her up?
Yeah, give her up. You're the one that got her killed. If she never meets you, she's safe.
You don't understand. We don't have to give her up. I'm not gonna give her up.
Yeah.
I'm on a virtuous mission here. It's a revenge mission. I'm trying to save the life of my wife, a woman that means a lot to me. And he's like, well, if it's really about saving her life, just show me the picture and I'll never marry her. And old Joe won't do that because it's not necessarily all that virtuous. He doesn't necessarily want to save her. He wants to hold on to her. He won't give her up.
Right.
To save her life.
He wants to have her.
So he won't let young Joe see the picture. But if he had, are we to believe that as soon as he looks at the picture, it changes everything? They don't have a situation where everything kind of gets rewritten in some kind of montage of time getting rewritten. You're still out in the cornfield at the end of the movie, even though old Joe has never been there.
Right. All of these things still happened.
Right. He was there, but he wasn't really. Does Emily Blunt remember seeing him there and remember seeing him disappear? So she knows that he did, but he, if you're really going to care about that, then yeah, you're going to hate this movie.
Yeah. That was what I got so hung up on the first time I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I'm trying to follow this through, the timeline simply doesn't work.
No. The way time travel works is very unclear. It's very messy. And if we're being honest, the whole movie is pretty messy. I envision it like a house of cards and is just ready to collapse.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to enjoy it, it's so visually stunning and kind of exciting.
And narratively rewarding.
Narratively rewarding.
It's a very rewarding story. And it's complex from an emotional standpoint. It's effective. Like, what it's trying to do is very, very effective. And this is an emotional movie, even though it paints itself as sort of a high-concept sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
That's not the focal point. That's just a vessel by which to tell the story that this movie's trying to tell about these people.
Sure. Walking up to the cornfield when he pulls up in that truck out on the barren road and throws that gold bar at his feet and says, "It's time to walk away." It's just like,
yeah,
it's just cool, like it's cool Western movie stuff.
And the comment earlier about the blunderbuss having a range of like 5 feet comes back there because he immediately starts to shoot at old Joe, but the blunderbuss can't hit him.
Right.
Because it's just too far away. The accuracy's all out of whack. It's a great moment. There's a lot of great moments in this movie that...
A lot of really cool stuff.
Capture exactly the sort of mood and, I don't want to say expectations, but there are things that happen that are very consistent with the sort of genres that Johnson is trying to emulate here.
Sure. Yeah, the Western, the noir.
He does a very good job blending them all together.
Yeah, it's really great. And we're just going to talk about cool stuff at the big climax there. Flying around on that motorcycle, and young Joe fires the blunderbuss into the street.
He uses the blunderbuss's limited range to his advantage to kick up a cloud of dust.
Yeah, so that he couldn't, like a smoke screen. Yeah, it's just so cool. I just love it.
Yeah.
From beginning to end, I think it's really great. I think as a time travel movie, maybe it doesn't work the way you want it to.
Yeah, I don't think if we were, and I've mentioned this on the show before, if we were compiling like a list of movies or shows that would be sort of on a time travel major track in college, if you were majoring in time travel, would this movie end up on the syllabus at some point? I think the answer is no. Because it's not really... It is a time travel movie, but it's not really a time travel movie. Now, I think this could end up on a syllabus in terms of trying to suss out or create some sort of scenario of where all of these things are possible. Like, can you reverse engineer properties of time travel that are specifically designed for this movie so that it does play by a set of rules? That would be interesting.
I think it...
Because I'm not sure you can. I don't know how you reconcile all this stuff. It's just that things that happen in the present, regardless of where this character's from.
Part of the conversation is, well, when I do something, do you remember it?
Right.
And he says something, well, it catches up with me.
Well, the answer is yes.
It's cloudy for a while, and eventually,
Yeah, the answer is yes, because as soon as young Joe sees the boy use his powers on, who's that poor guy's name? Jesse, I think?
Yeah, the enforcer.
The guy, I really like that guy a lot.
Yeah.
But as soon as young Joe sees that, old Joe is like, oh, he's at the farmhouse.
Right. Probably didn't have to kill these other 2 kids.
Yeah. Did he kill both or just the one? I hope he just killed the one. I hope he didn't kill
Well,
Piper
he killed
Parabo's
the one,
kid.
but then that's the other interesting thing is that the other one was the son of his girlfriend when he was younger.
Piper Parabo's son in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Which kind of didn't go anywhere.
No, it was just sort of a thing.
Yeah, and then
it was just sort of a thing that was there to further complicate the situation for old Joe. He's like, oh, why did it have to be her kid?
Right.
I didn't think it would be a kid that I know.
Right. And it doesn't really develop further than that.
No.
I guess one thing I would ask, and this is more about you and I and what we do here, would you consider our podcast a review podcast? Do we review these movies? Did we review the show?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And somebody mentioned to me the other day that I was on a review show. And I was like, I don't feel like I've been reviewing these things, but I guess...
Well, I mean, in the strictest sense, we do review the episode and talk about what happened in it or take it apart, but we don't say, I give it a B. I guess we did do that for some
Well, we
episodes,
did at
though.
the end of the season, though,
We do at
right?
the end of the
So,
season, we give things, but I wouldn't.
I guess I just never really thought of it because it would be really hard for me to do that for this movie because of, like I said, I can see both sides of an argument here, and really it just comes down to I like it.
Sure.
And I can see why maybe you don't, but you just need to get over yourself.
Yeah, well, it's just a matter of, can you let these things go? And if you can't, that's probably okay. And I think Rian Johnson's probably okay with it because he gets that there are people out there who care about these sorts of things. I guess what I felt the first time watching it, like he was talking down to me, like I'm a fool to even consider that I'd want to know the rules of time travel because it's a fictional concept that doesn't exist. But it's still physics-based, so I need to know how it works within your universe. And you can tell me anything you want about how it works.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, it's not condescension at all. It's just him saying that that's not the important thing.
Right.
The important thing is what we're all here to do. Once that clicked with me, it sort of altered the trajectory of the entire movie for me in terms of just my experience with it.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, a lot of people just feel like it's lazy to just not try and explain it. You'd lose that entire scene of that guy falling to pieces, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
And it could just be that he had this image in his head and thought it was cool and needed to put that all together and didn't care whether it really, really works, because it doesn't, obviously.
Yeah, realistically, what should have happened early on with Paul Dano's character is as soon as they took his feet, he should have disappeared from the street and been stuck behind that fence he climbed over. Because I don't know a guy without fingers and feet who's going to be climbing over a fence.
And then the other issue, I guess, is why make it imperative that you kill your old self? Why wouldn't they send you back to be killed by another
By
looper?
Paul Dano?
Yeah.
You know, when you retire, they throw that party for you? I mean, and you see that here, too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You do get that party. It's like this sort of rite of passage, almost, is how it's treated in the movie. That one thunderhead at the beginning who seems kind of really put out at first, and then he's like, hell yeah, close my loop, woo, That guy. It's like a rite of passage for these guys. And none of them appear to be particularly,
been out of shape about it.
Suggested that they all had hard scrabble upbringings, and these are guys who were desperate for work of some sort. Joe is plucked off the street and given a gun, is essentially the way he tells the story, right?
Right.
So I can see people who feel like they have nothing to live for at any point in their life get an offer like this and say, so here's the deal. You're going to kill yourself one day. But after you do that, you have 30 years and virtually unlimited funds to do whatever you want with your life. I mean, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. I mean, most people can't retire with 30 years of livable life.
Right.
Now
we're projecting 20 years out from this point. 2044. Yeah. It's not going to get any better.
This I actually have a question about, and I don't know if you're going to have an answer or not, but Emily Blunt recognizes him as a looper.
Yes.
And
do people know about this? How does she know about this?
How does she know about that?
The whole point is that nobody knows, right? If somebody in 2044 knows what a looper is, then the authorities in 2074 clearly know what loopers are, right?
Right. And when she said, you're a looper, I was like, oh, she's more involved in this than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But not really. I don't know what the purpose of that was.
No, all we know about her is that she had a rough life, hard partying, stuff like that, right?
Yeah. And she gave up her son, who was mostly raised by her sister.
Until her sister died, and then
presumably at the hands of her son.
Right.
So.
Yeah. We do see a lot of scenes early on where Joe and his, let's call them co-workers, are out partying and, living it up. And so if she was kind of part of that lifestyle, and we know she was because she understands the signs of withdrawal that Joe is going through.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, maybe she partied with some guys that were loopers.
Yeah. That would be my assumption there, is that she has a connection in her past to the underworld in Kansas City.
I think I was trying to square it with the fact that her son is the Rainmaker and think that it was somehow connected, but that makes much more sense. It's kind of messy. It's a pretty messy movie.
Sure.
And I don't typically like messy movies. I'm very much a structure guy. But I think this does follow a narrative structure. And, well, even that, maybe it doesn't.
No, it definitely does. I think it does, but...
Okay, well, yeah. Some people may not. The video I alluded to where it's like, well, he becomes a passive protagonist for half the movie. It just kind of derails. And what kind of story are you trying to tell here?
A Western.
Yeah, exactly.
As Nate observed, it's a Western.
That's what I feel like, too. It's like, I kind of like the idea of just kind of hanging out at a farmhouse with a single mom and her kid.
And it wasn't like the stakes went away at any point. Right. There were things that
they were building,
up.
sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I dig it. Big fan of this movie. Big fan of Rian Johnson. Time travel galore.
Check out Brick, which has nothing to do with time travel.
No, but definitely has everything to do with Rian Johnson. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He's the lead in that.
Yeah, you're right. Good for them. Well, folks, thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe to the feed so you never miss an episode. Do you know someone who loves time travel stories? Heck, do you know people who don't love time travel stories? Those are the people we're really trying to connect with. Recommend our podcast to them. Remember that we are also available on YouTube in an audio format. You can like, comment, and subscribe there as well. You can also still email us. Yes, still email us at OhBoyQLPod@gmail.com. The QL's never going away, folks. We'll always remember it.
We don't need to remarket that, huh?
No, we've been throwing this one out there for too long. No, it's
50 episodes.
It's just too confusing.
Okay, understood. I want to share a few reviews that we had of our old format. Good boys.
Hell yeah.
Good boys.
Thanks, Mom.
These guys are great. They love old Quantum Leap and find stuff to love about this show that I also love.
Oh, that's
If
good.
you miss the waiting room and want Ben to swap with a T-Rex, this is the show for you.
Oh, that's how you know this guy listened to all the episodes, because it's definitely... I've brought up the T-Rex a couple of times.
Yeah, that's right. And then one other one. Excellent podcast. Stays on topic during the discussion. Critical of the episode flaws and gives praise when due. Overall, a balanced and entertaining discussion about the Quantum Leap reboot. Tip, please do not interview persons associated with the new show. The interview podcasts lose all objectivity when discussing the show.
Oh, that's it, because you got to be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good
point. We promise, sir, to not do that.
Yeah, I think
I think that boat has sailed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did want to thank those of you out there that really enjoyed the show. As we move into this new format, we hope you'll stick around, and it's exciting things on the horizon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could find us on social media. I'm CaptainBern, Captain Byrne on Blue Sky, and Brian.Lee.Martin on Instagram and Threads.
And I am at Action Nate on both Blue Sky and Threads.
Until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm Nate.
And we will see you in the future.